It's 2017, so two very important things turned 40 this year. The seminal science fiction masterpiece, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and me. I'm not getting a theatrical re-release, though, because everybody forgot about me, but that's okay.
You're watching So Awkward. This is Freddy Krueger saying hi.
Hey everybody, welcome to So Awkward. It's me, Don, and I just saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Not for the first time, but for maybe like the dozenth time. But I did just see it for the first time in theaters, which is very exciting. I love Steven Spielberg. He's my all-time favorite filmmaker. Possibly my all-time favorite storyteller in general. I love Spielberg. And this was exciting for me because I have seen almost all of his movies in the theater. But I think since like Temple of Doom, I've seen 99% of them in the theater since then. I missed the BFG and Always, I think, but that's okay. I still haven't seen BFG, but I don't know. I've tried watching it. It's on Netflix, but anyway, enough about that. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was Spielberg's third theatrical release. I guess you could argue that it's his fourth theatrical release, since Duel, his made-for-TV movie, was such a big hit. They released in theaters in Europe. But this was his third theatrical release in the United States. His third intended for release in the theaters. Of course, his first was Sugarland Express, and his second was Jaws, which was such a massive hit. After that, he was given carte blanche, and he could make anything he wanted, because at that point he was a god. It was the first film in history to make $100 million. It, along with Star Wars a little bit later, created the summer blockbuster. That was Spielberg. So the film he did was his passion project about man's first encounter with alien life. It's considered a classic. It's beloved. It's well respected. It's not among my favorite Spielberg films. And seeing it in the theater didn't necessarily elevate it in any way, but it was still worth seeing, and I recommend everybody seeing it because visually it's still one of his best and one of his most iconic and one of his most important. I just think narratively, it's never really gripped me. The story is really thin, and the main character, Roy Neary, played by Richard Dreyfuss, is just so thoroughly detestable, in my opinion. He's just not sympathetic or likable at all, which is nothing wrong with Richard Dreyfuss's performance. I think maybe he was a little bit miscast. I think Spielberg has talked about how he's cast him because he has like a childlike quality, which he does have, and this is like a Pinocchio riff, but he plays him a little too much with a childlike quality and a little too funny, and it's just, I don't know. He's a shit to his wife, the beautiful, charming Terry Garr. How can you not fall in love with Terry Garr? This is Terry Garr at her second cutest. At her most cutest is in Young Frankenstein. I love Terry Garr. She's great here. He's a crap to his kids. He eventually he becomes so obsessed with meeting these aliens that he's emotionally abusive to them. And even Spielberg has kind of admitted that if he made this movie now, because he made it back when he was a swinging bachelor with no kids, and he said if he made it now, there's no way, spoiler, that he would have had his main character, who was a family man, basically abandon his family and treat them the way he treats them in this movie, to go into space with aliens. And I would agree with that. It taints the whole film for me, but it's a masterpiece visually. There's no director who can tell a story just visually better than Steven Spielberg. I talked about Duel, which is basically just two cars going at it on the highway for 2 hours with almost no dialogue, which is one of the reasons they released in Europe. And like the whole last act of this movie has almost no dialogue. It's just aliens communicating with humans through lights and musical tones, and it's amazing. It's brilliant. So the movie opens, and it's amazing where we first see the UFOs. And then the ending is amazing, the grand finale, where the aliens come back and they have the real third encounter. First is seeing evidence of aliens, maybe, like crop circles. 2, I think, is seeing a UFO. 3 is seeing an alien. So it opens with 1, then maybe we get 2, then at the end we get 3. All I don't know what 4th would be. 4th is anal probes. So the first part of the movie is amazing. It's gorgeous and iconic, and just the special effects are amazing. Spielberg's visuals are amazing, and the ending is phenomenal. Really, the middle chunk of the movie just drags, and it's all about basically Richard Dreyfuss's character's obsession. He has these visions of the Devil's Tower, and he makes the tower out of mud, and it's just boring, and he's so awful to his family. It's off-putting. Like, there's this scene where he finally starts to really lose it, and he rips up all the trees in his yard, and he starts like stealing shrubbery from like his neighbors, and he steals their fence, and he's throwing it in his window because he's making this sculpture of Devil's Tower, which he keeps seeing in his mind, and he doesn't know what it is, but he has to make the sculpture because he's obsessed, because the aliens, I guess, are giving him visions, although it's never really explained, which is another fault of the film. But the whole scene is just so weird, and the family is just like horrified. But the way Richard Dreyfuss plays it, and the way it's filmed, is really funny, so you're laughing at it. And that kind of describes the film for me. There's just a tonal disconnect between what we're seeing and the way they're presenting the story. Like, there are so many scenes that are played for laughs, which shouldn't be. But I heartily recommend it. If you haven't seen it, definitely go see it in the theaters, because it holds up 40 years later. The aliens still look bad. The aliens, I remember as a kid thinking the aliens looked bad then. But the UFOs still look great. It's all practical effects. There's no CG stuff, because this is 1977. But it's just the basic design of the UFOs and of the aliens is so creative that it doesn't matter that the technology is outdated, because it still looks really great. And visually, it's one of Spielberg's strongest, because he was still, I don't want to say an immature filmmaker, but he was still putting visuals over narrative structure, which I think as he went on, he overcame. But it's one of the... So visually it's really amazing, but also it's the kind of movie, like, after you see it, it's like, wait, why did any of that happen? Like, the UFOs fly over and it cuts out everybody's power, and then Roy's in his truck and everything starts to float and he gets weightless, and he looks over at the mailboxes and they all shake and they all start to open. Like, why does any of that happen? And nothing in this movie makes any sense. But visually it's so well done, you don't think about it until you're in your hot car afterwards. And boy, is it hot. Anyway, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. What else do I have to say about this movie? It's not bad by any means. I mean, I have problems with it, especially with the main character and his story arc, which I find it hard to relate to and to appreciate. But it's not bad by any means. I mean, this isn't The Terminal. This isn't Always. It's lesser Spielberg for me, but lesser Spielberg is still better than the masterpieces by most any other filmmaker. So I recommend it highly. I think it's in theaters for a week. Check it out. Because I do love it. Because I love everything Spielberg does, except for The Terminal and Always, and maybe AI, and a couple others. But I do love this, and I think it's an important piece of film history. It's a really well done science fiction story. And it was an important in the growth of Spielberg as a filmmaker. If he had never made this movie, I don't think we ever would have gotten E.T., which is where I think he really gets the story right. He focuses on the kid and not some adult who wants to abandon his family. Thumbs up. Anyway, bye. After the credits roll and Richard Dreyfuss, is in the UFO, the alien's probably like, all right, get the anal probes ready. And Richard Dreyfuss is like, wait, what?